Hey guys, welcome back to third vlog. So today's going to be an easy day, 15 minutes at a light pressure, stroke rate 14 to 19 range, drag factor staying in that low kind of 80, 85, maybe a little below 80, and effort should be maybe for the split about 8 to 10 seconds slower than what I would expect to do on a normal aerobic longer day, to really kind of emphasize that easy day in contrast with kind of the harder day that I'm doing right now every other day, working on building the volume up on those hard days. Right now I'm at 30 minutes, want to get that up to 60 minutes within the next month, and so just kind of focusing 3 days a week on really loading the body and doing something to kind of push my effort, and the other 3 days are kind of really active, trying to be consistent with the work of getting something done every day, but alternating the effort. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of kind of keeping their aerobic effort very similar from one day to the next, whether it's volume, whether it's intensity, whereas I think that you'll get a lot better results if you, instead of doing, say 20-30 minutes every day, 30 minutes one day, 15 minutes the next, and then as you get comfortable with that, bump it up to 45 minutes one day and 15 or 20 minutes on the light day, and eventually get to where you can do 60 minutes alternating days, 30 minutes light on the other days. But those 30 minutes is still a lighter effort than the 60, and you want to make sure, and people do a lot of times, is that because their aerobic effort is shorter, they'll actually go harder on those shorter days, because they don't have to work as long, which is definitely an error. The longer you're going for your aerobic training, generally should be your higher effort, and the shorter you're going on your aerobic training, the lighter the effort, because those shorter ones are not the sessions that are going to create a significant aerobic stimulus. It's the longer ones that are really going to kind of push your threshold for aerobic capacity and oxygen utilization, which is why it's called UT2, oxygen utilization, and or UT3 or UT1, which we haven't touched on yet. But all this aerobic work is really just enhancing your body's ability to use oxygen by laying capillary beds along the sites of the muscles where blood is getting delivered to it. So a little bit of science there, training science, but I'm gonna hop on. Today is a lighter day, so it actually is kind of getting more to that conversational pace, and I'd call it maybe UT3. And so I'll set up the camera. I'll talk a little bit about kind of my ideas in the general technical sense of when I'm rowing, and help you guys get an understanding of kind of my perspective on what a good rowing stroke is. So let's dive into that now. So when I'm setting up here, I like to row barefoot. I think it just gives you a better feel for the stroke, for the connection, and honestly, rowing shoes are designed to add cushioning under your foot. And if you're pressing onto the foot plate to create impulse through the drive, then it's probably not a great idea to put a little bit of spongy cushion under your foot to retard that force. And so from a performance standpoint, I think barefoot is the way to go, and it just feels better. And being a Florida guy who is used to doing a lot of training in 80-90 degree heat, generally we try to wear as little clothing as possible, and that includes shoes. And just trying to get this monitor going. There we go. So barefoot, I like to put this rag under it because for me, I sweat a little bit on my feet, sweat a lot if I'm rowing for more volume. I like to use just kind of like a raggy hand towel, and I'll pull that up, the little corners up through the heel cup, and then I'll put some water on it to get a little bit of grip so that the towel itself isn't slidey and you're not sliding out of it. and that just tends to take good care of my heels. So I'm not getting a lot of blisters, and I'm also not sliding out of those heel cups when I'm coming up to the catch, which is really disruptive to the rhythm if that's happening. And then for the damper, if you're coming from outside of the actual rowing world, if you're just kind of indoor rowing or CrossFit or maybe an Orange Theory, for the damper setting, generally want it in the lower half. For your training, you might want to kind of drift toward the middle if you're actually doing a competitive piece. You really don't need to be using those higher numbers. Using the higher numbers is just increase the drag, and so it'd be simulating like rowing in mud, as opposed to the lower numbers are going to be like rowing in the water, so a lower resistance. And where you want to feel the effort coming from is the impulse that you're producing on that resistance. So the firmer your connection, the firmer your push is, the more resistance you're going to get from the flywheel. You don't want to just make the flywheel heavy. And so you could also compare it to maybe rowing like a big dory, you know, kind of one of those big wooden paddle boats you see kind of in a, you know, romance movie, you know, paddling around the pond. So just a really big, heavy boat. Whereas the lower damper setting is going to simulate an actual racing shell, which is going to apply well for people like myself who are involved in rowing. And I think it's just better for fitness for people that are using the indoor rowing to develop their aerobic fitness. So those are the settings. Sitting on the seat is really important. I always kind of sit and just kind of, you know, bounce around a little to make sure that I'm centered on the seat. You know, so many times as a coach, I'll just walk behind a kid and they're just like 2 inches in one direction just because they're not thinking about where they're sitting on the seat, and certainly that's going to create imbalance in the stroke. So I'll just kind of bounce to get even on that seat, settle in, make sure that I'm on, my hips are rotated forward. So that'd be an anterior rotation of the hips, which should also be, you should be very comfortable sitting in this position, feet down, hips forward, just like you're kind of engaged in a conversation with a camera with somebody else, as opposed to if you were posteriorly rotated, which you'll see a lot of kids are used to kind of slouching in the seats. They might sit on the air like this, their hips are tucked under them, in which case it's not going to be comfortable kind of sitting there and talking. You're going to have this slouchy position, and you're also not going to be able to get into a very good forward angle if your hips are rotated in that way. So the top of the hips rotated toward the back. So you can kind of sit there or just sit with your feet planted, kind of scoot the butt until you're comfortable sitting in this position. And then from there I'll strap in and lay hold of the handle. So picking up the stroke is another important thing. I don't ever let my athletes just kind of like start with some strokes really lazy and then add in. You know, we always start with purpose. So you get there, lay hold, good extension, press with power from the first, immediately into a nice relaxed rhythm as we go through that stroke cycle. Nice light pace here. Focus on the sequencing. Extend the arms, set the body angle, compress, and push with the long suspended arms. So if you've set up properly from the release into that position, when you push, your power should suspend through the skeleton and not through the muscles. Right? So it'd be like hanging on a pull-up bar. You know, it's much easier to hang on a pull-up bar like that than like this. Same thing with the rowing stroke. You want your arms long so that the power transfer is happening through the skeleton, which is not going to fatigue and that you're preserving those muscles to add impulse to the back end of the stroke. Okay? Because you must accelerate the handle through to the release in order to be an effective rower. So if you're just maybe a CrossFit or Orange Theory devotee, or just indoor rowing and don't get on the water, this probably hasn't been drilled into you. But because the rower is only going to measure how much you accelerate that flywheel, it doesn't really care how you accelerate the flywheel. But you know, granted, I'm biased coming from the perspective of a rower, but there's a reason Olympic rowers are Olympic rowers, and they have, I think I can have good faith that they have learned the most effective way to produce power, and that is by accelerating the handle through the stroke so that every point in the drive, your handle should be moving faster than the point before it. And the best way to do that is to allow the legs work in isolation through about the first half of the leg drive. And then as the legs move through 90 degrees, angle here, and 90 degrees is going to be its peak biomechanical efficiency. So once you move past 90 degrees, you're going to start to weaken. So that's where you're going to want to bring the body in. So the body and arms are held forward through the first half, and then about halfway through you're going to start to draw the body back with power. And then similarly, once the body gets to about vertical, then you're going to bring in the arms so that we're all finishing together. The body supplements the legs as the legs weaken, and the arms supplement the body as the body weakens. And they're all going to weaken as they move past the 90-degree position. Ideally finishing all about the same time. Maybe finishing with the legs just a little bit before the body and arms. But that would be something that if you're a large male, certainly an elite male rower, you can have a little bit more separation between the legs and the body finishing the stroke, just because a large male rower is going to have a lot more strength to accelerate the back end of the stroke. But certainly a weaker or younger male or female athlete is not going to have the upper body strength, and so the upper body is going to be best used to supplement the power of the legs through the second half of the leg drive. So another thing that I think is really important to help new rowers, or less experienced rowers, or any rower that just hasn't had a high level of professional instruction, is you'll see a lot of people bringing the handle to the body with the wrong muscles. And so you want the handle to be drawn to the body because you've drawn the elbows through the ribs, not because you've pivoted from the elbow to bring the handle or the hands in. So you want, boom, the power to come from here and bring the elbow back, and not from the bicep pulling the hands in. And so the handle is going to be connected to your elbow through your forearm. If you bring your forearm back far enough, you'll bring the handle into the sternum. And if you're bringing your handle into the sternum by pulling from the forearm, pulling from the hands, rather than just drawing the elbow and subsequently the handle back to the release, you're going to be using a much weaker muscle of the bicep instead of the big muscles of the lats. So a good example I'll do when I'm coaching, and you guys can do here, is if you stop, you just grab that lat, keep your arm down, and just flex that muscle. It should really fill your whole hand. It's a big muscle. And if you raise your arm and try to flex that muscle again, then you don't feel it at all. So if you are pulling up, if you're tense in the shoulders, you're essentially stretching that muscle, and this muscle can't be stretched and flexed at the same time. So also, that size that you feel, that lat, and you're not going to get that same size from the bicep. So why use the bicep to bring the handle into the release when you can use the lats in the back to bring the handle into the release? You're going to get more power if you draw the elbows through the ribs, back here, not here, but back. A much stronger send into the back end of the stroke. And you're going to generate less fatigue because you're using a bigger, stronger muscle. Another benefit is that if you're bringing your elbows back, then the handle is moving in the direction of the elbow. And the elbow is probably moving around that sternum height, which is really where the handle should be drawn into. If you're bringing your handle in with your hands, they can bring it anywhere in this range, all right? Because they're in control, and they can go up, they can go down. So a lot of times you'll see athletes rowing up super high into their neck, and they couldn't do that if they were drawing the handle properly with the elbows and the lats. Because to do that, you would have to be like this, which I've yet to see anybody do. So draw the elbows in through the ribs, so your elbow should be just passing the torso from a side view, or at least getting to the end of the torso if you're a little bit less flexible. And that'll help recruit the big muscles, and also make sure that you're applying power linearly, which is always your goal, especially if you're a rower on the water. Because the water is horizontal, so your manipulation of that handle needs to be horizontal to make sure the oar is working the way it was designed to work. So the next point of focus can be in how the handle approaches the catch. So for me, it's very important that the handle rise and that you are reaching the handle height before changing direction that you're going to have throughout the drive. So that you should not keep your handle low and then initiate the drive and have the handle moving up at the catch while you're pushing. So the handle needs to have risen to the height of the drive before you initiate the drive. And the way you're going to do that is by letting the entire arm float up as if it was filling with helium. So the arms float up to that horizontal as if they're in just a balloon getting filled with helium every time you compress with the hips into the catch. And if you're not used to this, feel free to exaggerate. Do it early. I'll say, if I'm coaching, that by the time your handle gets to the handle catcher, you should be up at the height that you're going to need to be for the drive. And then if you do that, the handle should just have a nice smooth horizontal path from the catch to the release every stroke. And you'll notice also the chain should be super smooth. All right, the chain has a smooth action throughout the rowing stroke. If you have a lot of bounce, probably because you're just hitting, or you're doing something sudden or jerky with the hands throughout the stroke. You want a very subtle manipulation of the handle through the stroke cycle, and that's going to manifest in a very smooth chain action throughout the stroke. And then if we go now and talk about how to carry the handle away from the body, you're going to get a lot of different ideas about how this can happen. I'll share mine. So, for drawing in, we should extend the hands and then let the hands get heavy. Once they're extended, they're going to stay heavy until we begin to compress with the legs, and then the hands are going to get light, fill in with helium into the front. So extend, get heavy, get light, and push. Extend, sink, lighten, push. Extend, sink, float, and push. I do not advocate a push down at the release. This is going to be because it just doesn't translate well to the water. So in the water, when you get to the release, one, if you're in a sweep boat or you're rowing with one oar, then the pivot should come from the outside arm, and it should be like this. Not like this, just like this. And also because the oars are so long and your fulcrum is relatively close to the boat compared to the edge of the oar, it takes very, very little vertical motion at the release to to create the lift you need in the oar. And if I see people on the erg, they're just pushing down a lot. And you're never going to push down that much in a boat to get your oar clear of the water. So it just doesn't translate well. And also, unless you're sculling, you shouldn't be trying to push down with both hands anyway. And the more important muscle pattern, if you're a rower, is the idea of holding the body angle, letting the hands lead the recovery cycle, extend without dropping, get the extension, add some weight to the handle, establish body angle, compress, and let the handle float up to the catch. Extend, sink, float, and push. The elbows, extend, sink, float, push, smooth chain action. Those are our focus points. And drawing with the elbows through the ribs and not with the hands up to the chest or neck. Elbows back, extend, float, push. We've done our 15 minutes plus some. So yeah, nice easy recovery day. Every stroke you take is an opportunity to develop good muscle memory. So you don't ever want to take no matter how tired you are or how what you perceive might not be not important because it's not hard. Every stroke you take is an opportunity to develop muscle memory, to develop those neuromuscular patterns. And for me, whenever I've been doing light rowing, certainly if it's just an active recovery workout, or even if you're doing active recovery between light pieces, or you're warming down from a long work, you have to think about rowing very precise, very crisp, very technically perfect strokes so that you're getting more and more muscle memory. And if you can think about it as an investment in a bank, every time you take a bad stroke, you're pulling out of that bank. And so if you're spending 15 minutes there just taking lazy strokes, you got to put in at least 15 minutes of taking good strokes to counteract that. It's a horrible plan for becoming a better, more efficient rower. Take good strokes all the time, all right, from the very first stroke. And that's why when we set up to start our work, no matter what the work is, we set up with purpose, we're in a good catch position, and we accelerate into our rhythm, whatever that rhythm is, all right? We don't ever just get on, grab it, and just kind of get moving, and then decide maybe 2 or 3 strokes in. All right, now I'll start to work. Horrible habits develop horrible technique. All right, and technique, whether you are a rower on the water, where technique is paramount, or a rower on land, the technique Even if you don't need it to maximize your performance, you're always going to need it to minimize your exposure to injury and imbalance. So that's it. So that's my focus here. Let's stretch out a little bit. Hip flexors, Asian squats, and we'll call that a day. All right, so that's the day. Hope that helped you guys. Good technique. Got my sides kicked ginger. Just ready to go inside. But thanks a lot for following. Hit a like and subscribe. Hit that bell notification. It'll let you know whenever I got a new video out, which should be every day if I'm doing what I'm trying to do, or at least 4 or 5 times a week at the worst. But that's it. So thanks a lot. Throw a comment down if you have a question. I'd be happy to respond. Not a lot of people watching at this point, so I should have plenty of time to answer questions. And yeah, so good luck with your own rowing, and we'll be back tomorrow.